they really here to see me? What? I really don't believe this. This is overwhelming.
I mean, I heard there was standing room because every seat was filled. So it's like the Stones that have come to town. You know.
Why don't they all buy the books? Where were you when the books come out?
Well, I'd just like to remind you.
I know. Look, it's a real adult audience too. I know what I am to you. I'm nostalgia, right? I don't know. I have mixed feelings about being nostalgia. Where are the kids?
These are the kids.
Where are they?
It's been 30 years.
This is so nice. This is too nice for me.
Well,
much too nice.
It's amazing. And I'd just like to remind you all that Mr. Stein here has been scaring us all for 30 years, and that Goosebumps is one of the best-selling children's series in history with over 400 million copies sold.
Thank you. But I don't know who counted them. I don't know about who counted 400 million books. I don't know. I don't know where that came from.
Well, happy birthday again. Are you doing anything special to celebrate?
Yeah, I'm here. Look at this. What could be a better birthday than this? My God. Incredible.
Very nice. And
Are we done?
yeah. All right. Thanks for coming by. Now let's go back to the start of Goosebumps. It's been 30 years since Welcome to Dead House, summer of 1992. And when we spoke earlier this summer, you said that the idea for Goosebumps originated with one of your editors, correct?
Yeah, I've never had an idea in my life. Okay, someone else. But no, the actual truth is, I was doing Fear Street books.
Give up Fear Street.
We were killing off teenagers every month. We killed a lot of teenagers. It was doing really well. And my editors, a couple editors said, we should try a scary series for 7 to 11-year-olds. And I said, no way. Because I didn't want to mess up Fear Street. And no one had ever done it before. But that's the kind of businessman I am. I didn't want to do Goosebumps. You believe that? And then finally they kept after me, and I said, all right, if I can think of a good name for the series, we can try 2 or 3. And so I went home and I was trying to think of a good name for Goosebumps, for the book series. And this is true, I was reading TV Guide magazine. And in those days, they used to have the TV listings in the middle of the book and everything that was on TV. And I was going through the magazine and there was a little ad at the bottom of the page, and it said, it's Goosebumps Week on Channel 11. And I just stared at it. I just stared at that ad. I said, that's perfect. We'll call it Channel 11. Don't laugh at that. No, that's a horrible joke. But that's really where the name Goosebumps came from. And I said, okay, we'll try 2 or 3. And now it's 30 years later.
Right. And you were writing for the magazine Bananas, the comedy magazine.
Well, that was my magazine.
That was your magazine.
It's honestly true, I never planned to be scary. It never occurred to me to be scary. I always just wanted to be funny. I was jovial Bob Stein for years. And I did this humor magazine called Bananas for 10 years. That was like my life's dream, to have my own humor magazine. And when that ended, I thought I would just coast the rest of my life. I had no idea. But it's a very embarrassing story, that it wasn't my idea to be scary. I'd always loved horror. I grew up with the EC horror comics, The Vault of Horror, and Tales from the Crypt. I loved those when I was a kid, but I never planned to write it. And one day, I was having lunch with this woman, Jean Fywell, who was the editorial director at Scholastic. We were having lunch, and she arrived at lunch angry. She had just had a fight with a guy who wrote YA horror, who shall remain nameless, Christopher Pike.
Shots fired.
And she said, I'm never working with him again. you could write a good teen horror novel. Go home and write a book called Blind Date. She even gave me the title, and I didn't know what she was talking about. What's teen horror? I didn't know. I ran out. This is embarrassing because it wasn't my idea. And I ran out to the bookstore and I got books by Christopher Pike and Lois Duncan and Diane Ho and Richie Tankersley Cusick. Remember her? These books who were writing teen horror already, and bought their books and then tried to figure out what I could do with my books. And then Blind Date, I wrote it, and it came out as a #1 bestseller. I've never been close to that, with my funny stuff. And a year later, I wrote another teen horror book called Twisted, and it was a #1 bestseller. And I said, forget the funny stuff, right? I've been scary ever since.
And just going back to the start of it with Dead House, tell me why was that the genesis? Why did you want to riff on the haunted house concept in the first book?
Well, it was a zombie book, Welcome to Dead House. And I've always thought that book is too scary for the series. I didn't really know what I was doing yet. And I didn't have the combination of humor and scares. I didn't have it. I just didn't know. And I just think it's a book about a boy who moves to a new town, and everyone comes up to him, everyone he meets, and said, I used to live in your house. I used to live in your house. And it's basically a whole town of zombies he's moved to. But I always thought that book is too scary for Goosebumps. Then the second book was Stay Out of the Basement. And that's funny, right? That had a lot of. I think I caught on by the second book.
Right. And can you talk about that the TV adaptation of Stay Out of the Basement? That twist ending. It's always stuck with me. With the flowers saying, "I'm your father."
It's about a father who's turning into a plant, and it just started. People always say, "Where'd you get the idea for that? Where'd you get the idea?" And usually, I don't remember. No, really, you don't remember where'd you get your ideas, right? Yeah, but I had this just picture in my head of a father, a man, who takes off his baseball cap, and instead of hair, he has leaves growing out of his head. And I just had that picture, and the whole book actually grew out of that picture.
That's awesome. And looking at the Goosebumps writing process on a general scope, I mean, what would you say is how do you approach a book? What's your writing process like?
My writing process? Well, I work backwards for most authors, I think. I think most authors get an idea for a book, and they start writing, and then later they think of a title. But I have to have the title first. And I tell you the truth, I've written every story a human could write, right? I mean, there's nothing else to write. So I don't really think about ideas. I don't try to get ideas now. I just try to think of titles. And I think of the title, and the title will lead me to the story. And that's how I start every book. I was walking my dog in Riverside Park, and these words flashed into my head. Say cheese and die. Where? I don't know. Where'd that come from, right? I just have this. So I said, what? That's a great title. Where? What could it be? Maybe these kids find an old camera, and maybe the camera takes photos of bad things that happen in the future. And that's how I do almost every book. I had this great title I loved called Little Shop of Hamsters. And I thought, oh great, I have to write that. But then, how do you make a hamster scary? That one was a challenge. I'll tell you a title I've always wanted to do and can't do, okay? I think a really good Goosebumps title. Morons from Mars. It's a good title, right? And I took it to my editor, Scholastic. I said, I'd like to do a book called Morons from Mars. He said, you can't do that. You'll offend the morons. That's true, he really said that. I'll offend the morons. So I couldn't do that title.
It's not too late.
Everyone's offended these days.
And how long would you say it takes you to write a Goosebumps book?
How long?
Yeah.
Oh, I know, I used to be faster. I outline every book first. I do a complete chapter by chapter outline of every book. And when I start to write, when I sit down, I know everything that's going to happen in the book. I've done the whole hard part. I've done all the thinking so that I can just enjoy the writing. So I usually spend a week on the outline, right? And maybe 2 weeks now, 2 weeks to write the book, 2 to 3 weeks.
Right. And what's the process for coming up with twists? Because Goosebumps books aren't
No,
Goosebumps without twists, right?
Yeah, there's no process. Everyone always says, oh yeah, he found the formula. He found the formula. There's no, what's the formula? I wish I knew the formula. I don't know the formula.
Right, and there's that great line in the Goosebumps film.
Oh, yeah, thanks for reminding me. No, seriously, I wish I had written this. It's a perfect line. It's in the first Goosebumps movie. Jack Black is me, and at the end of the movie, he's teaching school. And he says this line I wish I'd written. He says to the students, he says, every book has a beginning, a middle, and a twist. That's like perfect, right? I wish I'd written that.
And, well, we're going to have Tim Jacobus come up here soon. He's the original illustrator of a vast majority of all those amazing Goosebumps covers. He's going to come up on stage and talk with Mr. Stein soon, but I just wanted to bring up Tim quickly because I think his paintings should be in the Louvre because they're just so
awesome. I like
awesome.
to do this because Tim does all the work. He shows up and I just watch and make comments. He's got all his art, the original art and everything. And Tim, you did like over 100 Goosebumps covers. It was pretty amazing. And I'll tell you, we had a very strange way of working. I was writing a Goosebumps book every month. I was doing 12 a year. And we had to write, and I would be writing the book, but he had to paint the cover before the book we even knew what it was. And I would send him like a little paragraph of what the book was going to be. And he had to paint his cover from that. And he got almost every single cover matched the book. It was perfect, except for one book. There was one time where he totally missed. And it was Say Cheese and Die. It was that book, which was about an evil camera and kids who find an evil camera. And the painting came in from Tim. It was a family of skeletons barbecuing. I don't know, there it was. And of course he couldn't change the painting, right? And the editor calls me and says, Bob, you have to add a scene with skeletons barbecuing. Girl, Carly Beth, who wants to be scary at Halloween time. And she pulls this really ugly mask down over her head and it sticks to her face. And she can't get it off, and it starts to turn her evil. And I like that book because it's one of the few books that was inspired by something that really happened. When my son Matt was real little, he was a little guy, and it was Halloween time. And I was watching him, he was down on the floor in the living room. I'm watching him, and he tried on this green rubber Frankenstein mask. And he pulled it down over his head, and he couldn't get it off. And I'm watching from the doorway, and he's tugging and tugging, and I thought, what a great idea I should have helped him. I didn't win the Good Parent Award that day, but I thought, great idea, just started making notes, great idea.
And other than Jack Black and Morgan Freeman, who else was considered for the role?
I don't know, I think Jack was very early on. Jack flew in a blizzard to meet me, and we had lunch, and he just stared at me the whole time. And he said, Bob, what in the script is true about you? And I said, Jack, not a single thing. Nothing, there's nothing true. He said, all right, I'm going to play a sinister version of you. And that's what he did.
Dig it. And we have a new Disney Plus series coming out based on Goosebumps. We just got some casting news this week. Justin Long just joined the cast.
It's exciting. A whole new series.
Yeah, anything you can tease about that?
I can't tell you anything. Maybe I don't know anything. I don't know. But it's in production this month. I'm starting to film this month.
Right, and this is your second Disney Plus series to be based on.
Well, I have a series based on my graphic novels, Just Beyond,
Right.
which is 8 episodes on Disney Plus, and they're really nice. They're sort of Twilight Zone for kids. I love those shows.
Right, and just looking, I mean, now it's 30 years. We have all your Goosebumps, not just as books, in all these different mediums. I mean, why do you think this IP is so enduring all these years later?
You know, I think kids, seriously, I think people like Goosebumps because it's not linear at all. So much of children's literature just goes in a straight line, and you know what's going to happen. And Goosebumps, to me, the most important thing are the twists and all the surprises. And I want somewhere in the book, the reader has to say, "Oh no, I had no idea that was what was going on." I love, fooling them. And I think that they like that, and I think the surprises are the main reason that Goosebumps has been around so long.
Right, and something you said when we spoke earlier over the summer again, I thought that was a really cool insight, was that kids like to be scared, but only if they know they're safe. Can you expound on that?
No, why do people? Everyone likes scary stuff, right? We all like horror, but when we know we're safe at the same time. And for a kid to have these scary adventures and be fighting these evil things, and they know they're in their room reading at the same time. I think that's a big part of the appeal. And they all have to have happy endings. They demand happy endings. That's a really important part. I once wrote a Fear Street book with an unhappy ending. I think it was called The Best Friend. And in the end, the good girl is taken away as a murderer, and the murderer gets off scot-free. And I just did it for fun for me, just for once to have a little fun. And the kids kids turned on me immediately. And I started at my mail, "Dear R.L. Stein, you moron, you idiot, R.L. Stein, you idiot, how could you write that? Are you going to write a sequel to finish the story?" And I would go visit schools, and some kid would hold up their hand every time. "Why did you write that book? Why did you do that?" It haunted me. And I had to write a sequel. They absolutely couldn't accept an unhappy ending. It's interesting, kind
And now I have a big question for you. Are you aware of the Ermiger Goosebumps meme?
Of course.
What are your thoughts?
I hated it. I hated it. Then I got to like it. Then I got to like it. It's funny.
Who brought it to your attention?
It's funny. You know who brought it to my attention? Jeff Kinney.
Diary of a
Jeff
Wimpy
Kinney,
Kid.
who writes the Wimpy Kid books. I was at a book convention with him, and Jeff Kinney came running over and said, "Bob, look at this. Look at this. What do you think?" I don't know why he's so anxious to show it to me. And I hated it immediately. But then I got, it's funny.
Right. Who would you say is the most unexpected Goosebumps fan you've met over the years?
Most unexpected Goosebumps? I don't know. I tell you, yesterday, maybe she's here today. I did a book signing here yesterday, and a woman came up to the table. She had flown 27 hours to be here from Kuwait. She came from Kuwait to meet me. I haven't really gotten over that. That's really, I know, it's unbelievable, right? That's amazing. That's an amazing thing.
I mean, look, we have a full room packed. Packed to the
They're
rafters.
not from Kuwait.
Yeah. We don't know that for sure.
I wouldn't come from Kuwait to see me. But I live right up the street, so it's easy for me.
Right, and now, I mean, we're back after post-COVID. It's great to be back in person, right?
Sure is.
And I mean, just what's it like now? You have being locked down for the last few years, and now being back in person, getting to tour again and meet the fans.
What was that, a question or what?
What's that like?
No, it's great to be back out. I love seeing my readers, and You know, what's not to love? Come on, look at this room. It's amazing. So it is, it's great to be back.
Awesome. Yeah, Bob, that really does it for my official list of questions. Anything to add?
No, I thank you all. Thanks, everybody.
And that's not the end of the panel, folks. We have the man himself, Goosebumps illustrator extraordinaire, Tim Jacobus. Thank you. So yeah, everybody who's here today, it's nice to see you all. You've stopped down at my table, and the number one question you've all been asking me is, where's Bob Stein? He's right here. Finally, I know the answer. He's right here. So we got some slides that we're going to show you, and it's artwork that Bob and I worked on together, and some of your favorites, I hope. So
Can
we
you
could
see
go
from
through it.
there? Why don't you turn
Yeah.
the stool around?
Good idea.
Yeah, so you can see better. See anything?
Nah. We're good. We're good.
All right, good.
All right. So I started out my illustrious career, and my parents, you know, LeBron James's parents, they knew right away that he was destined for greatness in basketball. My parents, that was not there. They noticed I didn't know how to spell. I couldn't put any arms on George Washington. So I think they were just happy I got past the 3rd grade. We were working on a series of books out of Scholastic. They were called Women in Jeopardy. And it was always kind of the same theme to the books, where there'd be a mom and she would stumble onto a murder mystery and she would solve it herself. And I did a series of buildings, and it was always kind of a formula. And you would have what we call the worm's eye view in the illustration. And you put something going on in that low foreground, and then the building would be large and foreboding, and it's kind of dramatic, and it works well on a book cover. So when Welcome to Dead House came along, one of the art directors said, hey, you know, we really like what you were doing with those Women in Jeopardy things, so this Welcome to Dead House, can we do that worm's eye view thing? So I used an old trick for a new book series, and that's how Welcome to Dead House got off the ground. So the haunted mask. Behind the haunted mask is my goddaughter Jessie. And Goosebumps was starting to get popular, and I said, Jessie, you want to be on the Goosebumps cover? And she's like, oh man, Uncle Jake, I want to be on the Goosebumps cover. And then I brought her over to the house, and I always take pictures of people when I use real humans in the stories. I like to take photographs. And I handed her a mask. It didn't look like that mask. And then I told her to put it over her face. At that point, she realized no one was ever going to recognize her on that Goosebumps cover. She was so mad. You see that horrible face on that mask? That's nothing compared to what was going on behind that mask. She wouldn't talk to me for the longest time. Luckily, this became one of the biggest sellers in the series, and I got her a couple of cases of books. She passed them out to her friends, and she was able to tell her friends that at least the top of her head was on the Goosebumps cover.
There it is.
I know we talked about this, Bob talked about this a little at the beginning, but this cover for me was when I kind of understood what Goosebumps was about. Because, yeah, there was a horror element to it, but there was also a comic element to it. And so when I did this cover, I thought I hit a home run. I thought this was perfect.
funny, you know, we got the family of skeletons, and then I turned it in and, you know, I said, what did Bob think? He hated it. Only because he didn't hate it. I'm making all that up. But it is funny, and I actually didn't know this story till years later. I was surprised that I wasn't asked to redo my work, and you were asked to redo your work.
No, you never ask the artist. Never. It's always the writer.
Revenge of the Lawn Gnomes. This is the, when you do illustrations for books, you usually have to change lots of stuff because you're doing art by committee. And for some reason with the Goosebumps stuff, I think it's due to the fact that Bob was such a fast writer and we were putting out the book so quickly. We didn't have a lot of time to be messing with stuff. So when I finished this cover, this was the only one they asked me to change. So we have the two gnomes there, and the guy in the back is scratching the side of his head. In the original, he had his finger jammed up his nose. And everybody loved it. When we turned it in, they laughed and they were like, yeah, this is perfect, this is perfect. And then as it got closer and closer to the time to send it to press, everybody chickened out and said, no, we're putting these in schools. We don't need to encourage nose picking. So all I had to do was move his finger out of his nose to the side of his head. That's not a bad change. That's a pretty easy change. So Bob did a lot of special edition books, short stories, and we came up with a character, Curly, who was going to be on all of these books. And this was the very first one in the series. And we were coming up with a character. So we started with this guy here, and nice long hair. Back in the day, believe it or not, with my beautiful hair now, I used to have long hair, and I was like, oh, I'm going to put long hair on this guy, make him kind of rock and rollish, and he'll be a ghost and we'll be able to use him. Well, nobody liked him. So I took him home, I gave him a haircut, turned him into a skeleton, and Curly was born. And Curly's been on, I don't know how many covers, but for a while he was on more covers than anybody.
They used him for a lot of that. He was never in a book.
Correct.
There was never a book about him.
And then he got so popular, he got his own mascot, which through a reader's poll you guys named Drool. Eventually we started to do the Series 2000. For me, I really enjoyed the Series 2000 because I got a chance to get a little bit more drama in my pieces. When we did regular Goosebumps, there weren't written rules per se, but you didn't want to show anybody getting hurt. There was no red blood. Tried to keep it light, but when the 2000 series came along, as soon as they said I could, I popped somebody's eyeball out of the socket. So when the Goosebumps movie came along, I was excited, and I couldn't wait to see Jack Black play R.L. Stein, and the movie was moving through production, and I was like, boy, it would be nice to do something for the movie, maybe the movie poster or whatever, and kept going on, and then the movie was finished, and they were getting ready to release it, and I was like, I didn't get a chance to get into the movie. And then at the last minute, it was late in August, and the movie was coming out in October. And the guys from the movie said, hey, we're doing the closing sequence to the movie. And at the end of the movie, Jack Black turns to the camera, he screams, he morphs onto a Goosebumps cover, and the movie goes to credits. And they said, hey, we've been trying to create a fake Goosebumps cover for the end of the movie, and we've been having a really hard time. And he said, and then one of the youngest guys on the crew said, why don't we just call up Tim and have him make one? So right at the last minute, I got a chance to do a cover with Jack Black on it, and so I snuck into that movie right at the last 2 seconds of the movie, and I had to tell all my friends, you gotta look real fast because it happens real quick.
Oh, no. That's Tim and I, every morning on Instagram, we trade tattoos on people's legs and arms. There's more of Tim's art on people than in books.
It's starting to get that way, because it started out as it was a novelty, and you're like, holy smokes, I saw somebody with a Goosebumps tattoo. And then, as time's gone on, it's become more and more and more.
A woman sent me one of your piece of art, it was only in black. She said, I have to go back, I fainted, and I have to go back for them to do the color.
So, I have mixed feelings about it, because I love the fact that someone loves the work enough to put it on their body forever. But if my son did this, I would have him in the corner by the neck. And they get more and more dramatic every year. We've gone from single images to full sleeves.
Those are great. Those are actually great.
But my favorites.
I know, look at that. There are people walking around with that. Can you imagine?
It's one thing to have somebody adoring your artwork on there, but boy, oh boy, having your face on somebody, that's amazing. That's amazing. That is the ultimate tribute. The ultimate tribute.
Yeah, it is.
Well, I know I'd like to kid about that, but there is one more thing that I just saw recently that I thought was the coolest thing in the world. And that's R.L. Stein on a skateboard. You gotta love that.
At least I'm not on the bottom. He's not stepping on my face.
All right, guys, that's the end of the slide.